Good evening and welcome to our January 12th school committee meeting. We are returning from executive session a little bit late and returning to open session. I will call this meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, great. We will move on to the next item, which is consent items. We have minutes from November 17th, December 1st, and December 14th.
I move that we approve the minutes for November 17th, December 1st, and December 14th, 2022, as presented in the packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion?
Madam Chair, can we vote on them separately, please?
Sure.
Oh,
Do we need to change how we've presented that if we're voting on them separately? Because how you read them all together, do we need to read them separately to vote
I
them
move
separately?
that we approve the minutes for November 17th, 2022, as presented in the packet.
And
I'll
do we-
second that, sorry.
We'll give that one to Joe. And is there discussion on November 17th? Okay, so we will have a roll call vote. Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Beatsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
I abstain.
Great, okay, and Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Is there a motion for December 1st?
I move that we approve the minutes from December 1st, 2022, as presented in the packet.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Okay, ready to vote? Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Lynch?
Yes.
Beatsky, sorry. Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. And do we have a motion for December 14th?
I move that we accept the minutes for December 14th, 2022, as presented in the packet.
Second.
Discussion?
Just do a small typo on my name, but other than that, it's fine.
Okay. Do we need to amend that?
No, I'm sure that Michelle will just add the extra T.
Okay. And a roll call vote, Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Beatsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Great. Let's move on to everyone's favorite part of the evening with our student representative report.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Abbott. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a junior at the high school. Nora, the other student representative, is not here tonight, so it is just me. It's been a little while since I presented, so there's a lot to go over. I'll start with a couple highlights from before break. There was a band and chorus concert. It was a holiday concert. I performed in the band. It went very well. Knights Locker formal drive started. The Knights Locker is similar to the North Andover Middle School Knights Locker. It aims to help provide dignity to students who might not have the means to provide clothes for themselves. And the formal drive is specifically to provide clothes for proms and dances that are coming up. Winter athletics are well underway. We have indoor track, boys basketball, girls basketball, wrestling, girls and boys hockey, boys swimming, and girls and boys ski. The John and Abigail Adams Scholarship on the 7th of December. It was a night to recognize a select group of seniors who performed very well academically. The North Andover Parent Advisory Council staff appreciation on the 7th also went very well. They provided suites to teachers. Operation Donation with the Student Council was also a success. Each second period class was given a specific student or a specific child to provide gifts for. And the North Andover High School DECA team sent 57 students to states, which is great.
Wow.
The NHS blood drive is coming up. It's on the 18th. There is a junior and senior winter formal happening tonight, actually. There was also a mock trial tonight, which is where Nora is. And the there's a Project 351 launch on Saturday. Now, Project 351 is an organization that aims to empower leaders or young leaders in our communities. We have Lila Lobel representing us from the 8th grade at the middle school. I will also be there. I'm an alumni leader, and I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great. There's a robotics competition on the 21st, and there was a college-bound juniors night this past Wednesday. It was very successful. I was there. It was very informative. And seniors, at the same time as the juniors are starting their process, seniors are submitting their final applications. And finally, the NHS, or the Honor Society decisions came out in December. So congratulations to everyone that qualified. And that's all I have for today.
Great. Do we have questions or comments from the board? Ms. Picard?
Did you say you were in band?
Yes.
What instrument do you play?
I play the alto sax.
Thank you. Are you going to be president
Of the
of the
band?
United States? Right, we had a president that played alto sax. Good luck. Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Hicks?
No questions.
Mr. McDevitt?
Great job as always. Thank you so much.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you. You always do such a great job. And of course, you're welcome to stay, and you are welcome to leave.
He hesitated.
I know, I thought he was going to stay for a minute. Okay, we will move right along to the superintendent's report. Dr. Gilligan?
All right. Happy New Year. Welcome back. Winter recess went really quickly, but it was an exciting time. I really enjoyed getting to go, particularly girls basketball team. If anyone got to see the Methuen game, it's on tape. The winner at the buzzer was amazing. Really cool. A few things in the superintendent's update tonight. We're going to start with we work with a group called the Massachusetts Partnership for Youth. And so that we have a flyer here, principals are sending it out, but it's a student poster contest. And the student poster contest is around best environmental practices, keeping our community clean. It's kind of a cool thing. I think there's also some graphics work you can do too. So it might not just be, when we think of poster contests, I think we typically think of our elementary kids. But it'll be exciting, and hopefully we can get a submission and a winner from North Andover with this group, which has, I think, over 100 communities across the Commonwealth that they work with. So excited about that. Dr. Mealy, do you want to talk about your recent submission to the ARPA funding, the American Recovery Program Act funds?
Sure. So we have been kind of compiling items that we can apply for, and the first one we applied for ARPA funding was the special education review that we've been talking about. And that was Monday night at the select board meeting, and they approved $40,000 for that review.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Mealy. Next is some exciting news. I think, as many of you may know, that during the peak of the height of the pandemic, we had planned some recovery services around acceleration academies. It's a model really that the state has rolled out in a bunch of places. We decided to run it prior to the state coming up with funding for it. Well, it turns out we had the plans in place. We were well ahead 2 years ago that we ran it, and we were able to also apply for a grant that year and get some grant funding. Well, we applied again for the Acceleration Academy through DESE, and we were accepted just recently so that we can run Acceleration Academies this February and April break. And Lorene, do you want to just talk a little bit about what they do in Acceleration?
Sure. Hopefully my voice will hold out. So they're focused on math. They've been focused on math for the last couple of years. That's what the grant is for. Can you hear me? And we've just, we found out at the very end of last week, so we have revised some of our hiring practices, some of the requirements we want for the teachers, and those advertisements just went out. So we'll be hiring staff, and then we'll be going through the selection process. So we look at those students who are most in need of some additional time for math for this first, and then we kind of work up the chart. So we'll be doing that soon. And we're looking at all grades, like basically elementary right through high school, to provide some services for 4 days each week. So Mondays are both holidays, both of the vacation weeks, but the other 4 days we'll have the academies.
Awesome.
Can I just ask you, do you have a
Sure.
target number of students?
Oh, yes. So I believe, I just looked at it again yesterday. I think between the 2 weeks, we can service up to about 587 students.
Whoa,
Yeah, so it's a lot.
that's great.
Yeah. So that's between the 2 weeks, all, elementary, middle, and high school, but it's a good number of students.
Do you know how many
So-
staff you're looking to hire?
I don't know off the top of my head.
fair.
So, yeah, there are a lot of different positions. We have teachers, we hire a specialist, we have a counselor on staff, we have a nurse on staff, we have an admin assistant there, we have a site coordinator. So it's a lot of staff.
Sure.
Because we have students who may not show up, so we follow up on that.
Yep.
We have students who come in and may have be struggling with some things, so that's the reason we have the counselors. We do
Yep.
some social emotional work. The specialists have typically been PE teachers because they've been the people who've applied. But we work with them to wrap in math skills into the PE kind of things that they're doing. So kids have seemed to enjoy it. Teachers have given us feedback that they believe it makes a difference. One of the things I'm really focusing on, and Carl Larcombe is the person who's been really working on this, is looking at the data as we come out of that. 4 days is quick. But we really are targeting pre-assessments, and we actually talked about last year when we got these grants for February and April, they came very late, so we had very little turnover time. This year we have more time, so we're actually looking at using some of our own math assessments that go with our curriculum resource to help target those kids ahead of time and make sure that we are working on what they need to work on, and when we do those assessments during that week, make sure if they're succeeding like 100% on that we're doing something else as well, so
Sure.
that we're not just preparing teachers to do one type of skill. So,
Great.
I think what's exciting about this, we're almost famous twice, and I'll let Ms. Picard go. But some of the recovery services, particularly the acceleration academies, we had the governor scheduled to come visit, and that day, if you remember, there was a talk of a mask mandate. They made a statewide decision, and he got tied up with that, and he canceled. And then last year, we were going to have the deputy superintendent or commissioner for the whole United States Department of Education come and visit to see some of the program we're doing, and they canceled the day before, and they went, I think, to Chelsea. So we stood up twice, but really exciting.
I think third time's a charm. They'll be here this year.
That's right.
New governor, though, right?
Ms. Picard, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there going to be transportation for students to get to?
Yep, we provide busing, we provide breakfast and lunch and a snack, so yes. Yep, very comprehensive.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the funding covers that.
Yes.
Fabulous.
And how big is the funding? Like, what was the size of the grant?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. I remembered the number of students, but I didn't remember the total money.
All right. Next up, just an update on the middle school addition renovation. Kittredge first. Thank you, Holly, on the agenda. So we're plugging along here with the MSBA in the Kittredge School Project. As you know, a school building committee was formed. I don't believe they've met. We have not met just yet at the Kittredge School Building Committee, but there's a set of deliverables that we have to meet to stay in this, and it's something that's like pinned right on my bulletin board. I think Jim has right on his as well. We're excited. This is going to happen, and it's a huge generational investment for this community because we're looking at roughly around 50.1% reimbursement from the state, which just makes such a huge difference for the taxpayers. So to be accepted on the first try to get a Kittredge school into that pipeline was remarkable. As many may know, we applied, I think, 4 or 5 times for the middle school trying to get in, and we were not successful in doing so. So that's exciting. Followed by the North Andover Middle School addition and renovation update coming up. I think it's hard to believe that we will hopefully break ground in 2023 on that addition. I was at an event just yesterday, and I ran into a 6th grader, and I said to him, I think by the time you're in 8th grade, this could be done. Now, you never know with construction, but Does anyone want to chime in? There's been a couple building committee meetings for that. I don't know if Joe or Dr. Mealy want to add anything to that.
So there have been two. I've had conflicts on both, so I haven't been able to attend them. So Joe, I know you've been
Yeah,
at
we
these
met
meetings.
in early December, and then we met just on this past Tuesday, and we got to look at the a very close to final version of the design plan, which is really cool. There's still some survey work to do and some other things to finish up, but the plans look really great in terms of where the addition is going to be. The survey work has to be finished to figure out where the new access road is going to be located and the elevations and all that. But I think our next meeting is in early April to do for the building committee to give final approval to the design, and we'll have the estimates, and then they'll start putting the bid package together, and then we'll present at town meeting in mid-May. And the goal is to have that bid package go out right after the money is approved, so that we can start construction as soon after the money is allocated and available on July 1st. And we seem to be on target for that.
Yeah, and another big step that occurred in North Andover, we do what they call a TRC meeting, which is
And that was
technical
yesterday.
review, and that happened earlier this week.
Yeah.
All of the different departments attend and talk to the design firm and the OPM, and let them know what they need to keep in mind as they're working, and what kind of plans they're going to have in place during the construction. So that happened. That's a big step when we get through that. That was good. And Joe's right regarding the funding. Once it's approved at town meeting, we can then advertise even prior to July 1, which is when the funds become available, because the process takes long enough that we won't be spending any of that money until July 1, but at least it gets it going sooner.
Yeah, and we got to talk about, start thinking about all the little details about size of ceiling tiles and where outlets should and should not be, and floors, and it's fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited. Dr. Mealy and I had a chance to meet with the middle school staff. Because oftentimes with projects like this, there's a lot of people involved. These are big projects, but really some of the most important input we'll have is from the staff. I mean, they know that building, they know the needs, and as someone who participated in the high school being built and moving in the middle of the year, sometimes you can get to something and say, oh, why didn't we do this way? Or you look at something that was built 20 years ago and you say, why do they have all this wide open space in the middle of the school? Things of that nature. But I think that this gives us a real opportunity, like the public forums did last year, for people to say, we've considered this, or staff have considered this. And there'll be some, student working groups and a few things. So it's exciting. I'm not sure that I would have believed 5 years ago that this was possible here. And I would just say thank you to all the folks involved, whether you served on the space needs as a volunteer, whether you are elected officials here with the school committee, select board. And I'd say it's reflective of the relationship the town manager and I have, and really appreciate a lot of the work Dr. Mealy's done. He's been involved in a lot of building projects here since his time. And it's remarkable to have a plan that's going to create the appropriate spaces for 21st century learning, as well as we can continue to tackle providing the staff for doing so. So we'll talk about budget tonight, but it's exciting to have two things going hand in hand with a longer term plan. And this is really exciting. So.
And one last thing, Dr. Gilligan, our next meeting is, I think, the second week of April, and it is open to the public.
Great.
And I just have one last thing, too. In addition to the meeting, Principal Gonzalez has a group of staff
Yes.
that he is meeting with on a regular basis, and they're giving the opportunity to other staff and students to provide feedback, and he is on the school building committee and able to provide that feedback to them.
Thank you, folks.
Oh, Ms. Picard?
Oh,
Yep, I have a few questions. I did come to the first meeting, so I was able to see, what the design looks like. I know that you guys have public meetings, and I know it's attached to, your agendas and stuff like that. But when we did the ABECC, we had a web page, and as we come up to town meeting, are we going to be having public presentations, ways for people to understand this? we only pay attention when it's suddenly in front of us, and we certainly don't want that to be obviously at town meeting or even on July 1st when shovels go in the ground and people go, what are they doing over there? Which always happens, because we all have a limited attention span, but there are plans in place for all those things, but they're not yet up and going. Where would one find the middle school? I'll ask a more specific question. Where would one find the middle school plans other than the agenda?
Great. I think we have a dedicated link right on our website for
Great.
Facilities Master Plan 2, if you haven't heard of it. It's a long-term plan. And I think one of the things that is exciting is not only are these things in the plan, and they do have to go back each year to town meeting to be approved and for different aspects, but we're really well positioned in terms of the working with the town and the schools of setting aside the appropriate funding to put for planning, design, all those things. So we do have a comprehensive site, and we will pick up as we get more information about exactly what the timeline is.
And I am correct in saying that this is going to be funded within the levy.
Yes.
I don't think we can say that often enough. This is funded within the levy.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to say that we're doing these things, I think one of the slides that we've seen a bunch as part of the Facilities Master Plan 2. Off the top of my head, if I recall correctly, there's zero impact to the taxpayer for the first 5 years we're plugging away at this. So that's exciting to meet those needs. And for a whole host of reasons, and if you go to that Facilities Master Plan 2, you will see it there. It's a link to our agenda tonight in the executive summary for the budget as well. So I'm excited about that. And then the last thing I have in the superintendent's report for the evening is just wanted to remind parents of the Save the Date, the North Andover Parent Resource Network, NAPRN. Lisa Roberts does a great job with that. She's remarkable. She does a lot of work connected with Lorene and the members of the community. And so we have Internet Safety with Katie Greer. That's at the North Andover Middle School. It's Tuesday, January 31st. It's 7 p.m. It's free, and you can RSVP right on the flyer that's linked to the agenda. I think we've sent it out. We've tweeted it out. It's on our website right on the front page. And I don't, maybe 10 years ago I'd have to explain why this is important. It was always a hot topic about phones, but they're ubiquitous now. So it is really going to be, it's a good event, and we're excited for it. So a really timely one. So, and that would conclude the superintendent's report for tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the chair's report, and the first item is actually a CREST update that I think Ms. Picard has some information prepared for us.
Yep, so we're required once a year to report out to you guys what's happening at the collaboratives, and particularly it's important for you to be aware that the audit was completed, and it was a clean audit. There were no concerns raised, and CREST is in a strong financial position. So those are really important things for the district, because the financial strength of both CREST and SEAM are important, because if there were financial problems within the collaboratives, the districts are on the hook for managing any problems. CREST has had significant overages in the past 2 years, but this year there aren't going to be any funds. When that happens, funds are returned to the district. This year there won't be any funds returned to the district because we didn't exceed our retained revenues cap. And CREST is expanding its services, continues to expand its services. There are more than a dozen services and different programs there. You may have seen in the paper that the Branch Street property was taken by eminent domain by the Methuen Public Schools, by the city of Methuen. That was a property on which CREST had a lease. And so with that transfer of property, CREST is relieved from the liability of that lease, which means that there are additional funds that can be used for program. And CREST has a brand new space that was opened during the pandemic, so there are some improvements to be made to the space. They've just put in a playground. So those are the things that are happening at CREST. Attached or linked to the agenda are both the annual report and the audit. They're very lengthy, so anybody from the public can certainly look at those if they're interested. I would encourage you to at least look at the pictures in the, just look at the pictures in the annual report. It really tells a story. They're doing great work over there, and it was great to get back into that building, or get into that building for the first time. The CREST meetings are hybrid, and they were fully remote for quite a while. So it was nice to get in there and have a tour of that space. If any of you are interested, they'll be more than happy to give you a tour of the space.
Thank you.
So we'll be getting those audit numbers from SEAM at some point, Dr. Gilligan?
Yeah, so we belong to two collaboratives, one's CREST and the other's SEAM, and we'll provide that information when it becomes available and they finalize it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on my chair's report is the open meeting law complaints. We need to review and respond. So over the last few weeks, or the past couple of weeks, this committee has received 4 complaints alleging violations of open meeting law. As chair, I have decimated the complaints to the committee members and included the complaints as an agenda item for tonight's meeting. Per the Commonwealth's open meeting law, the complaints must be reviewed by this committee, and we must respond to the complaints in writing or delegate this responsibility to town council. Our written response must be given to the complainants and a copy to the Attorney General. Included in our response is any remedial action this committee intends to make in response to the complaints. Before I open this up for discussion, I wish to make a few comments to my fellow committee members, to the CPAC members, and to our community members. I have carefully reviewed the complaints, as well as my recent communications with CPAC. In doing so, I can see how my words conflict with open meeting law requirements. For that, I am sorry. As an educator, I am committed to lifelong learning, and I recognize that I still have more to learn. As chair, I recommend that we delegate preparing our response to town council, as well as the determination of whether a violation occurred. Regardless of that determination, I wish to propose through a motion that the following remedial measures be adopted in our response. That the committee attend a comprehensive open meeting law training session. That as chair, I will endeavor to provide greater detail whenever possible and practical to my report to the agenda. That the committee review the policy manual to ensure that our policies regarding public participation are sufficient and in keeping with best practices. And that the subject of requested subcommittee be added to the agenda for the next meeting. Lastly, I would like to thank the community members who have advocated for what they believe is right. The children in our community are very lucky to have such strong voices. I also want to recognize the important work of CPAC members. We all want the same thing, to ensure that North Andover Public Schools is moving forward in positive and innovative ways to reach all learners and provide the best educational experiences for all our students. I, and I think I can speak for this committee, remain fully committed to working with everyone to make that happen. I think we need,
Madam Chair, you asked for a motion.
yes.
You asked for a motion that our reparations include open meeting law training for this committee, changes to the way you present the chair's report, a review of our policy, and to address a subcommittee at the next meeting.
I think before that, we need to motion that we will delegate the response to our town council, and I appreciate your
So I move
motions.
that we delegate our response to town council.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay.
We just responding to the timely nature of the suspending of the rules. Typical.
That's right. Yes, because we have to suspend the rules because we need to make sure that we respond in compliance with the regulations. We will need to suspend the rules so that we can vote to delegate the response
Take
to
3
town
on.
council. Did everyone get that?
So the motion then would be,
To suspend the rules first.
Go ahead.
I move that we suspend the rules to take under consideration Ms. Picard's motion about delegating responsibility to the town council.
I'll second it.
Okay. And then we need to vote for that.
Well,
Miss-
there's discussion on that, and just the timely nature would be, we have until the 18th correctly to make sure that we meet with, that would be the 14th business day?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure like that's the reason why we have to do it, because we have until the 14th business day to
Yes, yes, yes.
respond.
And then we need to vote to
Yes.
suspend the rules.
Okay.
First
Which-
vote is suspending the rules.
Yep.
Right, okay, so Ms. Picard,
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky,
Yes.
Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
McDevitt, and I will vote yes. Okay. This is confusing. And so now we need a motion to delegate to our town council.
So I move that we delegate the response to town council.
Is there a second?
Second.
And then a vote.
Or a discussion.
Or a discussion. Okay. It sounds like we might be ready for a vote. Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Vitsky? Mr. Hicks?
No.
Mr.
Yes.
McDevitt? And I will vote yes. And now there's discussion? I'm not sure what happens next, I'm sorry.
Now,
We still
now
need
we
another
should,
motion.
a
Now we-
motion to, about the remediation?
Right, Helen's motion that,
Do you want me to say
Yes.
it?
Again, yes.
I move that our reparations include open meeting law training for all of us, modifications to the chair's report, a review of our policy, and including a discussion of a subcommittee on the special education assessment at our next meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
And now we have discussion.
So I have a question on, I missed it when I was writing down, the modifications to the chair's report. What kind of modifications?
I think to just, I'm gonna refer to town council on this.
I think what the chair was looking to do is, given the nature of the complaint, in that there were discussions and there wasn't enough detail or notice to the public, to take a look at upcoming chair reports and to endeavor to provide greater detail and notice so that the public has an even greater sense as to exactly what's going to be discussed at an upcoming meeting. Is that what you were thinking?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, questions, clarifications? Okay, so are we ready to vote on our remedial action? Did you have a question?
No.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. Ms. Picard,
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
yes.
And I will vote yes. I think that covers everything we need to do. Great. We can move on to new business. And we have the superintendent's FY '24 recommended budget.
I'll just wait for Dr. Maley. All right, so I'm pleased and excited to present the FY '24 superintendent's recommended budget. And really an overview of what we'll cover tonight is we will take a look at the strategic plan and budget directives, the annual budget timeline, recovery services funding summary, recovery services, lessons learned and the benefits we've seen to date. What are the FY '24 pressure points, the FY '24 budget goals, recovery service adjustments, the FY '24 additional considerations, the FY '24 superintendent's recommended budget, and then the next steps, how that goes. So our budget is based on, as always, our strategic plan, and that's around equity for all students, so that we can ensure that all students are provided equal access to an excellent education that encourages them to improve their capacity to think critically, communicate effectively, understand and manage emotion, and engage in academic risks. Also, to provide a consistent and rigorous curriculum so that we can encourage all students to learn to the depth and distance of their abilities and leave our schools with the skills and knowledge to be career and college ready and for life. And last but not least, targeted professional practice, which would be to hire and develop excellent educators who utilize data, professional development, and collaboration to continually adapt their practices to best meet the needs of all students. Additionally, earlier this fall, we met at a school committee meeting, a couple meetings, to talk about school committee budget directives. And one of the key components there was to retain and/or add the necessary teaching positions to support the core teaching and learning mission, programming and special education needs across the district, retain the FTEs identified in the recovery services budget by providing the funding through the FY24 operating budget. If you can recall, and we'll get into this in a little more detail, we've added a significant amount of needed staff. A lot of it came as a result of the needs of the pandemic, but many of those positions were in our long-term plan. They were positions we needed prior to, and we haven't had the ability to add positions like this, like we have the last 2 years now. This will be going into year 3 to meet needs of our students. So last year we covered, with probably our largest increase in recent memory, we covered the operating budget with a 5.34% increase and roughly $1,190,000 covered the operating staff. Then we covered the rest with the ESSER grant, which was $1,040,000. And we knew coming into this year that we'd need a similar increase in order to keep the FTEs there. So we're excited in a little bit to explain that a little more. Additionally is to maintain the class sizes to meet our guidelines with no class exceeding 25 students. Our goal remains class sizes, particularly at the elementary, of K to 2, 18 to 22, and grades 3 through 5, 23 to 25. For those who do not know, we revised this, I think it was last year, we had revised it. These numbers were higher, and we'll talk a little more about the progress we've made with that, because it's been a really great thing to see, the decrease in elementary class size averages across the district. And at the secondary, the middle school and the high school is to have sizes of the classes to meet programming and needs. And I would just say a lot of this ties into what we were talking about before. Space. Simply put, if we wanted to add a lot more teachers at North Andover Middle School, there wouldn't be any place to put them. If anyone has kids at the Kittredge, you'd know like every nook and cranny of that school is used. So those were the school committee budget directives. So as we go to the next slide, Jim, just kind of a review of where we've been. So all along, several years ago, we proposed pre-pandemic a staffing plan that looked out of when we would be able to bring people on in positions that we needed. But we had to do that in conjunction with some unknowns at the time. What came to fruition at town meeting last spring with the facilities master plan too. So back in FY22, we really had to assess the impact of the pandemic. It was necessary for us that year to add high school positions so that we could put that new high school schedule in. And last but not least, provide the recovery services necessary to meet student need. Or be responsible that was the year we started to propose those positions. Then in FY23, it was really recovery. As I mentioned before, we covered over $2 million in staffing, along with other things, but $2 million in staffing for recovery services. And we did half through the operating, half through the grant. And the goal coming into this year was to really transition from recovery into funding out of the operating fund. And that's something we're proposing tonight that we believe we'll be able to do and create a budget to meet the needs. Now, that's really important because as the ESSER grants have ended, we all know that the needs coming out of the pandemic and the pandemic-related needs have not ended. And moving forward in the future years from FY25 to 27, you'll see in our plan some adjustments. We have to make some adjustments along the way, but it's to add the positions as we build capacity. and that would be the projects coming online. And when we build capacity, we want to maintain the positions in which we have, and last but not least, continue to be thoughtful as we adjust and plan going forward in FY27 for future projects. Okay. Dr. Maley, would you like to cover the Recovery Services funding summary?
Yeah, and before that, though, I just want to remind everyone that in working with the town manager, the superintendent and the town manager have included the addition of quite a few positions as those projects come online. They're in the long-term town financial plan. So this one just illustrates the funding that has taken place over the last few years. If you recall, the town provided in FY22 just over $2 million towards not just positions, but all of the things, getting the tents and the masks and everything that helped us get through. We used ESSER 2, all of the ESSER 2 money that we had left, and we used some of our ESSER 3 money in FY22 for a total of almost $3.5 million. In the FY23 budget, the recovery services funding went away because the positions, or at least $1,190,000 in positions, were added to the operating budget last year, and the remaining positions are coming in this year. So we anticipated using, and that keeps popping up, $2,280,000 of the remaining ESSER 3 money, leaving about $100,000, but it looks like now we'll only need $2,180,000 of the ESSER 3 money, so we'll be left with $200,000 into FY24. That, in working with Lorene and what we can do with those funds, that'll be available to us for some of the other things you'll see later in the presentation as things become apparent from the special education review, the committee working on the extracurricular groups and activities that are taking place and recommendations coming out of there. We'll be able to accommodate those recommendations with those funds.
Really quick, when do we have to finish spending that money by? Is there? Yes.
September 24.
September of 24.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can use that money over the course of next year.
Okay. All right. I knew there was a date. I just couldn't remember. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, and this slide is for visual learners, right, who like to see the bar graph that shows the gray area was the ESSER money, the orange, that first year, FY22, was the town recovery services funds, and the blue is the operating budget. It would be a lot more in comparison to each other, but we're starting at 51,000, so you can imagine that blue bar going much further down. And then FY23, you can see the ESSER money is in there, supplementing our operating. And then for FY24, we've moved all the positions into the operating budget, and that's what's reflected there.
All right, pressure points. I think we've heard this, and we've been working really hard, particularly, in my weekly meeting with the town manager around this budget and moving forward and being thoughtful. But there are some unknowns too in terms of the state, and I'm going to have Dr. Maley talk to the pressure points tonight.
So these are where, instead of carrying forward what we have this year, we have to anticipate more than a usual increase. The 403B match, we are seeing increased participation in that. A couple years ago, it was about $30,000 because of the number of people who participated, and now it's about 60,000. So we've had to bump that one up. The contracted services, supplies, and materials, no surprise there. We're seeing increased prices all across the board, and that has to be reflected in those line items. And same with utilities, especially electricity, our contract. We enter into a 3-year agreement, both the town and school department, and it's a new one, and the rates have gone up. So for that and for telephone, we have to reflect that. The salaries, we always anticipate percentage increases and step increases to project salaries. That's always going to be a pressure point. We're in negotiations with 3 groups this year So it remains to be seen what that amount will be in the end. Extended school year services, that's a higher cost due to increased needs and participation that we're seeing, directly a result of the pandemic. Transportation, we're going out to bid this year. We have that on the agenda tonight to ask you to allow us to go out for a 5-year agreement. But everybody is anticipating, based on the cost of diesel fuel, that those are going to come in higher. So we have a much higher number in there than we would from one year to the next when we're in a contract. And then out-of-district tuitions, if you haven't heard, OSD, Operational Services Division, has approved a 14%, up to a 14% increase in tuitions for private schools. The state is working on ways to mitigate that, and I have not put in anything to adjust for that in the budget, because the state's looking at either circuit breaker and increasing what districts get from circuit breaker, or increasing Chapter 70 funding, but ways to mitigate this. We've had conversations, because Chapter 70 increased, we wouldn't see that directly. That goes to the town. But we've spoken with the town manager, and she has assured us we've got the Special Education Stabilization Fund, we've got the Finance Committee. I keep.
Like an emergency fund.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
it called?
That's what I was asking.
Reserve.
It's a reserve, thank you. Yes, they're reserved that or you can go to town meeting and utilize free cash through a vote of town meeting in order to offset additional costs. So she's assured us that she'll work with us if that proves to be a problem.
Can you clarify what circuit breaker is?
Sure. So every year, and the formula changes, not every year, but most years, where about 4 times the cost of the per student rate, the state average,
Yep.
anything that a district spends over that amount is then reimbursed the following year at a percentage. So that's a way for districts to offset those extraordinary costs. And it's been at 75%. 75% is the max that they will reimburse, and it's been that for a couple of years. They've also started adding in transportation. It used to not count transportation towards the calculation, but it does now. And they've been ramping up from 25, 50, 75. I think they want to go to 100% on transportation costs being included.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would just note too that those are for the private schools, but the collaboratives are not going to have that same kind of increase.
Correct.
Good
It's a
point.
good
They'll make
distinction.
their own determination on increase, but it's not going to be.
Right.
Won't be 14.
It will not be.
We'll settle for 13. All right. Just a quick question. The Special Education Stabilization Fund, I remember we established this probably about 5 years or so ago.
Maybe even more, yeah.
We have not tapped into it in the past
Maybe 3 years.
3 years. Okay, that's
Yeah.
about what I was thinking. It may not be the right year for it now, but do we want to start thinking about potentially increasing that? I think it's up to $400,000.
So
is a
the
reserve.
current parameters are that there's $750,000 in the stabilization fund.
Okay.
We can, in any 1 year, we can access $250,000.
Right.
And in a 2-year period, $400,000.
400. I knew there was a 400. Okay. All right. So there's an extra cushion there. Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask, should I hold off on questions, or can I?
No, go right ahead.
That's great.
In terms of utilities, how much was the increase?
So it's about $100,000.
How many more students are we providing services for the extended school year services? What was the increase there?
It was significant last year because of we had the collaboration with the town services too, so, and it's gonna be even more because as Rick Gorman and Rick Alon expand their services, we do expand those services, and,
Marcy,
just-
can you use your
Oh,
microphone?
Sorry.
Sorry. Just due to COVID, the amount of students who qualified for services, so, I don't have the exact amount, but it was significant. I mean, I think it was $200,000 over the previous year, or something along those lines.
Thank you. And then in terms of out-of-district tuitions, worst case scenario, if it is 14%, like how much is that?
Right, so if it was a 14% for our existing
Yeah.
out-of-district student population, $450,000 to $480,000.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next slide, Dr. So really, the budget goals, talking about what we want to do with this budget. Let me get to that slide, Jim, so I can see. Talking about, I think what we've already mentioned, an operating budget increase to complete the transition from recovery services funding to the operating fund. Recovery services positions will no longer be covered by the grant. But we really know, working with our leadership team, doing the work we've done with assessment and the tools we have, that there are still a great many needs. The good news is that the recovery services positions, many of those were positions that have been in our long-term plan, and we'll see we'll talk about those when we get to the specific positions. The other goal is to adjust to the changing needs associated with, post-pandemic student needs. For example, it's no surprise. Pick up the newspaper, go on a website, ask a neighbor. The increased need for social and emotional and mental health needs has increased. And these may have existed pre-pandemic, but they've been exacerbated. And I won't steal all your thunder, Ms. Marks. She will be talking about these needs in the next slide. Additionally, we'll continue to pursue the enrichment, equity, and assessment opportunities, as we've been this year before the committee. We're looking at some innovative partnerships, and particularly, we're excited about the new high school schedule now that we're looking at opportunities for our students to go into the community, participate in different programs, and also do some work at some of our other schools with programming. And we're examining right now, for example, some of our high school seniors with that 7th period static block, doing some work with understanding our differences. They've had a hard time with volunteers this year. And yeah.
What does enrichment mean? I mean, I know what enrichment means, but what do you mean in this context?
Well, I mean, when we say enrichment, like these are opportunities that we're looking at above and beyond. So we're exploring. Like I met with the new chancellor of UMass Lowell the other day. And so whether they're expanded partnerships or enrichment opportunities, something like extended school year, or more commonly probably known to folks watching at home or in the audience as summer fun. Is we have additional educational opportunities that are also these enrichment opportunities.
Okay.
Would and I forget what we called it, but the partnership with Greater Lawrence with, I can't remember what we called it.
After Dark.
After Dark, that's right.
It's like a club.
Yeah, would that be one example?
Well, After Dark's a little different. As you guys saw, we came that night. We'd be getting some of the state funding they set aside for vocational training. I believe off the top of my head that's called Chapter 74 funding. And so, that would depend on who goes, what they do, how many kids are interested. But there is a deadline for us to apply for that. That's why we brought it in the fall to judge interest from this group. Okay. And we'll be back with a draft MOA for 2 reads and for your approval in the near future.
Okay.
And then continue to identify and address student needs. And I'm afraid that I could get going and start to take some of Lorraine's key points. So I will go next to, Mr. Mealy, the superintendent's recommended budget summary, if you want to just cover that.
So this is we have 3 sections of budget sheets in the budget that will be available online. It's in your budget books. We have a summary. We have a account description, which is rolled out a little bit more, and then we have a detail which shows every single account, so people can look at those. But this is just a summary by category. We do it by district-wide, elementary, high school, maintenance, middle school, special education, technology, and transportation. And so you can see the percentage increases from FY23 to FY24, and the overall increase of 5.5% for the operating budget.
Where we have special education and transportation, is the special education transportation in special education, or is it in
It's in transportation, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You all set, Chip?
And that transportation number for special education transportation reflects both in and out of district transportation, all the transportation necessary.
Correct.
Thank you.
And yes, it's good to know that the contract covers all forms of transportation.
Okay, so as Dr. Gilligan mentioned, just talking a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned from recovery services. We have seen that we have a need for increased mental health and SEL services among both students and staff. Some of the reasons for this are disruption of routines, feelings of isolation, definitely an increase in anxiety is something we've seen, depression, and low self-esteem. We've also seen a need to address academic achievement and unfinished learning due to interrupted learning time. There are trends that we see in North Andover that are very similar to trends that we see across the state. Just prior to the winter break, I attended a DESE webinar on writing and the ELA MCAS. Did you go to that?
I've watched the
Oh,
recording.
okay. So they talked a lot about how across the state the results have really been very poor. And they went through a lot of stuff you've heard before about how they set up the test and the scoring and all of that. But there were some really key points that I was able to pull out of that, which I've already met with our literacy team about, and we will be meeting with our teachers about as we move toward MCAS. Just as an example. And again, using our own assessment data. We've seen a need for increased and consistent use of assessments to provide data on student achievement due to the interrupted learning. We need to be able to meet students where they are. We're using our summative and formative assessments, so those would include things like our Foundations assessments, our Hegarty assessments. We have begun to work with the Wit and Wisdom program, so assessments that are there. In math, we have been using the Eureka program, and we've been started to use the EQUIP assessments more, the ST assessments, ST math assessments. So we have a lot of in-the-moment types of data that our teachers are able to use and look at. And then we also have our standardized assessments, are things like our DIBELS, our MAP testing, our access testing, and our MCAS testing. We also have seen a need for additional professional development due to additional pandemic-based social, emotional, and academic needs. So we continue to use our coaches to support teaching strategies and our curriculum resources. We continue to use our counselors and provide PD around challenging behaviors. And we have ongoing professional development and resources for staff, students, and families to help manage social, emotional needs and well-being. So we just registered our new SEL director, who I don't know if we said anything, I think we did at a prior meeting, but Megan O'Leary, who's been a staff member here, she came on after January when we were able to hire somebody to fill her position, and she's been doing a great job. We were on the phone this afternoon because, as you know, we have a PD day tomorrow, and we had another grant that was going to provide some kind of mental health 101 training, and the trainer got COVID today. So for everyone who thinks it's over, it's really not over. So that's not going to happen, but we'll have to figure out how we're going to make that up. And that was around also anxiety and the So Michelle has also just requested this week of me to go with a guidance counselor to hear a woman who's pretty well known. She's been around for a while. A number of our counselors have heard her speak about anxiety in school. So they are going to go to that, and they will come back and present to all of our counseling staff, guidance counselors, psychologists, school adjustment counselors, social workers, all of those staff. PD tomorrow for our elementary teachers is going to focus on writing. So as I mentioned, the writing webinar that I saw, so we're working on that. Lisa Deeker, who was our keynote speaker, will be working with our secondary schools around educating all of our students, including all of our students. So Marcy has worked with her to get that all set up. Those are just some examples of the kind of professional development that will be happening in either tomorrow or in the very near future. Also, a need to continue to address equity gaps due to the increase in these gaps as a result of the pandemic. So those students that have historically been marginalized students have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, and we all know that. But again, I'm just going to use one example. We did all of the reporting out on our assessments in the fall, but our DIBELS grade 1 are students on phoneme seg, our Latinx students, there was a 28% increase in the number of students who reached benchmark. So that was really good. So it's just an example. I wish I could sit here and say everything looked that good. It doesn't all look that good. There's a reality to all of this, but that is one example that was really specifically around, our students who have been, we've been trying to look at those gaps for those students and what we could do to make up that difference. So next slide. So just recovery services benefits. So our plan has played a key role in addressing and mitigating pandemic-related learning gaps. The recovery services listed below have provided and continue to provide support to meet the needs of our students, staff, and families. So that included social emotional support. So, and you'll hear more about this, but counselors, staffing, additional teachers, assessment tools and curriculum resources that came through grants, as well as some of the town money the first year. Diverse professional development, again, through grants and town money. And then support for our highest need students to ensure equity and access to an excellent education. So the money has allowed us to address a lot of types of things, like I said, high quality instructional materials, professional development, assessment tools. We've increased our MAP assessment from just grades 3 through 5. Some 6th grade students, primarily students who may have some special needs, to kindergarten through 8th grade. So. And then summer programming. Marcy and I met earlier this week to talk about some of the ESSER funds that Jim had mentioned before. And there are certain stipulations for how we spend that money, and we are going to be using some of that money for our high needs populations to be able to support the increase in the number of students that we're going to serve and increase the services that we provide. So. And we continue to apply for grants to support this work. For example, the Acceleration Academies that we just talked about. We have a couple other grants in. Whether we'll get them or not, I don't know, but we continue to. We have more grants. I keep slugging around this shoulder bag full of grants, and I was going to work on it yesterday. I was going to work on it last Friday, but other things come to the forefront. But it's certainly been a additional whole extra lot of work, the grants. So. But we're happy that we're getting them. They're a great benefit for North Andover.
Can I ask a couple questions before you go on to this?
Yes, you may.
So you've talked a lot about SEL and mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
This budget continues to have an SEL director in the future.
Yes.
And we're still talking about what I think you've referred to as Tier 1 supports or Tier 1 services, where we're teaching SEL skill building. This is not just talking about mental health counseling services to students. This is really about all students learning how to manage stress, manage their emotions, manage their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Tier 1, so every student gets that.
Right. So, for example, we are using responsive classroom in all of our elementary schools classrooms this year. We have a leader for the primary grades and then the upper elementary grades in each school. There was a meeting of all of those leaders today. So we get together, they talk about training. A piece of that is addressed at all of the school professional development time, so not the district like tomorrow, but the school-based professional development. And in the ESSER grant, one of the line items that I have is for stipends for particular things that meet the requirements. And that is something that I am including as we move forward next year, because we've been training these people, they've been working together, they've been helping to develop their skills to support the teachers in the school, so we're looking to have that continue next year as well. So that is all Tier 1. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And so I'll walk you through what these columns mean, and then we'll take you through the positions that we're at. But I think, to your point, Helen, it's really clear, although we've mitigated interrupted learning and some of the challenges, and we're doing so, relatively speaking, comparatively, like we saw this fall in the MCAS, how we're doing relative to all the other schools in the state at the middle, elementary, and high. These positions are really necessary next year, and many of them are with our long-term plan. So when we look here, the positions funded in the FY24 budget, I'll go through each of the positions in the column, the first column. The second column is the positions that we added last year, but they were only about half were covered in the operating budget. The rest were covered by grants. And so these needs exist. They're part of our long-term plan. And under this proposal, we're able to bring those FTEs as part of the budget guidelines and directives into the operating budget moving forward. And So you'll see those in the third column there in FY24 recommended. And then last but not least, FY25 through 27. Those are positions that are part of our long-term plan, and things that we plan to bring online, particularly as we look as each year goes. I think one thing we've learned is we have to adjust to the needs and adapt. The good news is the positions that we had predicted pre-pandemic are still the positions we need, but we might make some tweaks as we move forward each year. So.
And these FY 25 to 27, are these expected to be funded within the levy?
Yeah, so these are positions, and we'll talk about that. I'll specifically, I'll highlight here now. You don't see any teachers for the middle school. Well, we don't see any teachers for the middle school. We know we added an extra team member teacher in grade 6 a couple years back. It's not captured here necessarily because it's a couple years ago, but there's no place to physically put anyone else. So when you see FY 25, hopefully, right in that ballpark, we'd be looking to add 15 teachers and plan for that. That we're taking that into account as we move forward.
Thank you.
Can I just elaborate on that? So yes.
Within the levy?
Yes, but
I don't think we can say it too much.
as we said earlier, the town manager has built into the long-term financial plan, which includes the middle school project coming online and paying for the middle school project and Kittredge, and the additional staffing that comes when those open up. So that's what you see in the right-hand column. The elementary teachers and specialists, if you recall, Kittredge will be almost twice the size as is right now. So we build capacity at the elementary level right away. And then the middle school staffing as well. All of those are built into her financial plan that do not require increase to the levy.
Thank you.
Yep. So our proposed budget this year would include, or future years actually, part of the long-term plan. Assistant principals, you'll see that in 25 to 27. That's an area we've wanted to add. They play a critical role in supporting the principal to get out to be able to do evaluation, but more importantly, they help create an environment conducive to learning. And they also, assistant principals, they do everything, so it's, we had a formal one here. They do everything from connecting with parents to helping with, social emotional needs to academics, and really that coordination, and connecting with teachers as well. So that's in our plan.
Excuse me real quick, is that at the elementary level?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
That 1.5 will level all of our elementaries so that they have all a full-time assistant, correct? Because some of them are half.
That would provide so that they all have a half.
They all have a half.
Yes. We currently have 2 halves.
2 halves.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and so again, there's a lot to take in tonight, but we'll also, as we go and tweak the plan, we'll also look at, potential cost neutral changes or adjustments depending on, the other levels too,
Thank you.
if possible, depending on needs and staffing. So, assistant special ed director, that's something we had pre-pandemic planned. Prior to the pandemic, we know, our special education needs have grown, and we've hired more staffing to support these needs. So the administrative responsibilities out of the special education office here have increased. An assistant director could really help with a lot of things we have to farm out or have folks do in addition to their other jobs, typically in some of the off seasons like summer, but that would include oversight to essential programs like summer school, or extended school year, out-of-district placements, special education transportation coordination, and additional ongoing support at each school level, and working with the ETLs and the executive director, Ms. Bacuzzi. Custodians, we had 2. We had planned originally a couple years back for 2, and we think we need the 2.5. We've always been from industry standards. They do a remarkable job. I walk in some of these schools and I can't, I was at the Franklin a couple weeks ago and I looked down, these floors are gleaming. What year was this built? 1950 or 51? Or they do a remarkable job, but we typically have a day custodian at the elementary zone, and then we have a night custodian. And the plan to increase this, we think is important, and they've really proven we've known it all along, but what they did during the COVID years, I mean, above and beyond, lots of hours. So
Where would the additional half be?
I think Dr. Mealy would have to adjust. I mean, so we've got some halves right now in some of the schools on the split shifts. Like here at Kittredge, we have a half, and they cover this building as well.
Mhm.
This building does not have the needs necessarily all the time that Kittredge has. Dr. Mealy, any?
The real need comes in substitute, so that we don't have to double up on a shift or an assignment because too many custodians are out at any one time. So that's really where it goes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Registrar and parent liaison. I can't say enough. I can let Lorene say a few words, but the ability to do the outreach and the things we do, you know, like for years, we've had a program over at Woodridge in the rec center after school that we staff separate of the parent liaisons, but the ability to go out into our community and actually help folks who need help with registration, folks that need help with social services, wraparound services, you name it, they are a jack of all trades, and they're bilingual, both bilingual. So they do a lot of translation for us. They've proved invaluable, and it may be one of the best things we've done as a district. And so we had the parent liaisons, we had 2, and we want to keep 2. We had originally planned for 1, and I'm glad we hired 2. It's truly made a difference. Elementary teachers, we had 3 that were additional in the budget in FY23. We want to keep those 3 moving forward. As projects come online from FY25 to 27, along with for the Kittredge School, we'll need to hire additional staff, and we'll look at that. But, I think it was 20, let me take a look. I wrote this down because this is really remarkable. In 2015-16, 50% of our classes, 50, were over the recommended guidelines at our elementary schools. And it went down, we kept inching that down. And, building the ABECC truly helped, but adding this additional staffing and making these moves, even in FY21, have made a difference. So we went from 50% in 2015-16. When we moved into the ABECC, I think we were 43% over. Then we hit 29, and believe it or not, we're, I think it's 1 or 2% right now of our classes across the entire elementary district are over the recommended guidelines. And as someone who was a former elementary principal where we had almost every class, particularly 3 to 5 at 28, this is a huge step forward. And it shows we can do it with thoughtful planning. So that's exciting. Elementary specialists, we'll have to add more elementary specialists as time comes on. Kind of got an exciting thing to bring up a little bit later, similar to a specialist, will be the library media specialist, but they play a key role at elementary PE, art, music. So that is in the plan, future plan moving out. High school teachers, we added 2, and they were covered in the recovery services budget last year, and we propose having those 2. For those who may not remember, it was prior to my timeline there, I think it was FY21, we added 5 teachers at the high school in order to prepare and get that new schedule in. And so, we've added there. Middle school teachers, you see that here, very exciting. I can't even begin to tell you. We're one of the biggest middle schools in the region. We've had some of the highest class size over time, and we plan to 15 in the future years as part of the plan as that addition becomes a reality. Special education teachers, we had 2 that we had in last year's budget. We plan to have those 2 back. I also think it's important to note, again, right prior to the FY22 year, that's also something that we added 4 teachers across the district. Prior to that timeline I showed you early on, we had to add programming teachers at the ABEC at the middle school, and we added a special educator at the high school. All right, EL teachers. So the plan is for FY20, we covered 2 in FY23, and we'll have 2 back, and that will bring us up to a total where we have EL teachers across the entire district. It's no surprise, I think we've said this a lot, in the last decade, we've doubled our EL population in which we serve, nearly doubled. And we roughly, depending on the year, have between 28 and 32 different languages in this district, different languages. It's a strength of our community. It's awesome.
I just, kind of a cool thing, just prior to the break, one of our EL teachers emailed me and she wanted to know if we translate our progress reports into Spanish and Portuguese because those are our larger populations, but she asked me if we could get it translated into Vietnamese, I think Cambodian and Arabic, and they came back and just from a personal point of view, it was
Beautiful.
fascinating to see what they looked like because the alphabet is so different.
Beautiful.
But it's really nice to see that sort of advocating for our students and our families and our ability now. You know, I mean, when I first worked in this district, there wasn't like 2 pennies to rub together, so it was nice to be able to provide that for our families as well. So they're doing it, the EL teachers, which as I mentioned in an earlier meeting, we're trying to switch over to ML for multilingual, but they're doing a fabulous, fabulous job. So.
Yeah, and just on a side note, Lorena, I have to mention it because I don't think I said it earlier this year. A couple of the Superintendent Summer Challenge winners, Lorena and I had lunch one day with a couple of 5th graders, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys are like unbelievable. So we were with a young lady who had only been in the country a year from Haiti, and she didn't speak one word of English when she got here. You know, she spoke Haitian, she had French, Creole, and French, and you know, her English was in 1 year just so outstanding. And the other young lady had been here for quite some time, but she also spoke 2 different languages. And it's a real skill, real value to have. And it's really cool that we're able to put these critical positions in. School psychologist, you know, I think that's one of the needs that we continue to have. ETL, does that say ETL there or Evaluation Team Leader?
It says ETL.
It stands for Evaluation Team Leader. And they are special education positions and they work, you know, running the meetings at school. You know, all the meetings tied to special education. So we have 2 in this budget moving forward.
Does that mean there's one at each of the schools now?
It's not full-time at each of the schools. Those 2 were, the middle school and high school have directors only, and we added ETLs at the full-time ETLs at the middle school and high school. So every building has an ETL, but they're not full-time.
But they have one that's dedicated to them. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, that's increased with the need, and it's certainly valuable. K-8 math director, this is really important. That's a position that, you know, although we hired a while back, one of the few positions that were new to this district, we hadn't had any really support around this. We had a STEM director many years ago for the entire district. But this job is critical for you know, it's a big transition from going from elementary to middle school. And we think that vertical alignment and the work around the curriculum, professional development is critical, and that's an important role for us next year, and we'd keep that. And then counselors, whether we call them social workers, adjustment counselors, school counselors, they play a huge role in meeting these needs across the district. So it had been probably quite some time since we had additional counselors in the district, and this budget will allow us to continue with a school psychologist and 3 counselors in the district. Reading interventionists or reading teachers, they're in the budget. We had put in 4.5 as part of recovery services, and we believe we do want to keep those in the budget. They really play a critical role in providing that support for students with targeted intervention and support at the schools. Same goes for math. So we have a total of 6.5 interventionists. When we broke it down, when we first put the interventionists in, we weren't sure how many we're going to be reading in this, and this is how it broke out, and it's worked well for us. Media specialists. And, you know, I think really when people think of the traditional librarian that we used to have, we think of, I think, what a traditional librarian did probably when I went to school. It was with none, so I'm not sure it was my classroom teacher, but that's another story. This job has really changed over the years, and believe it or not, you'd think it's a position there's a lot of folks who are majoring in this, getting their masters. We connect with all the local colleges because we're trying to, when we have positions, we try to scoop them up. We added one last year, and we want to add another this year. That's going to bring us, this is a huge, huge for the district. You know, it was 10 years ago when I left the Thompson School. But when I left the Thompson School, there was not there wasn't, we didn't have a reading teacher in any of the schools, and we did not have a librarian. I mean, it was, it went around on carts. You know, it was going around on carts and checking out the books.
So what does this take us to? Is that?
That will bring us to 5. There's one at the high school full-time, one at the middle school full-time. And we've had that staffing, but at elementary, we had many years where we just had one librarian for the.
Meg Holmes.
Well, we had Meg, well, that's a little before the time I'm referring to. I'm talking about when we hired Courtney Ahern many years ago. She was the only one. And so, like, really, she started working with some of the volunteers at the schools to get this going. But now this gives us 5. And that also covers the ABECC too. So it's depending on the size of the school, how many classes they have. This gives us, in essence, really another specialist, you know, just like art, music, PE. And it's really exciting. And they are a great group.
So approximately half-time media specialists at each school.
Or more. You know, there's 6 schools, 5 there. So those are all elementary there.
Wait, there's 5 altogether, 1 middle, 1 high, 3 elementary.
This will make 7 total.
Oh, 7 total.
Yeah, 7 total.
So-
Thank you.
High school, middle school, 5 elementary, split between the 6 elementary schools.
Yeah, we hired one last year.
Yep.
To increase it, and you know, we believe that this will be a really important role for next year, and that's something we had on our long-term plan.
And does that include the partnership that we have with Stevens Library as well?
No, we've partnered really closely with Stevens. We had at one point to cover a split position, and it was working well, but as you remember, like it was. There were some challenges around like the timing of when courses are. You know, specialists, for example, like if you have a specialist, you know, you have music once a week, you have these classes. So it's really specific to the schools. And it also, we have to, the scheduling of it, Joe Clark does it for us. He oversees the elementary specialist schedule. It's like a puzzle because people have to be in certain places. So the 5, though, excited.
Okay.
They also teach a lot of the keyboarding technology, so I actually met with all of the elementary ones last week and talked about the DESI webinar and the MCAS and the kind of technology skills that we want to make sure the students have prior to that, because I would have been one of the kids that would have gotten tripped up by that. So I want to make sure that that they were aware too. So we met on that, and we also, even though we're not sharing a librarian with Stevens, we still do a lot of partnership work.
Right.
So we are doing North Andover Reads, and on February 13th we have an author coming in virtual visit, Raoul III. So he will be here, and the publicity will come out very shortly. We're just finalizing all the documents between the library and our librarians, but there's still a lot of partnership.
Great.
Yeah. And Lorraine, we talked about the math interventions. You want to talk about the coaches?
So, yeah, we have, the budget is recommending that we keep the 4 coaches we have. So those 4 new coach positions are a literacy coach at elementary, a math coach at elementary, and then a literacy and a math coach at the middle school. And that's been really pivotal in some of the work that's happened at the middle school as well. The 2 coaches at the middle school also do some intervention as well, so they do a little bit of both. And we have invited the coaches to some of the meetings that we have around elementary work so that there's that transition. And there is a gentleman who's one of the gurus of coaching. His name is Jim Knight, and he is presenting it in New Hampshire on January 26th. And the entire coaching team, elementary and middle school, are going to hear him that day. So there's that collaboration between the 2.
And we had funded for 5, but we only filled 4, and we feel that's sufficient, and that position was the one used for the media specialist.
Excellent.
Yep. And the coaches, we've got 2 at the elementary and 2 at the middle, right, Lorraine? That's what we have.
Those are the new ones.
Yeah, the new
those
ones,
4
yep.
positions there.
Yep.
We have more coaches at elementary than that.
Yeah.
But those are the new
In
positions.
the new budget, proposed increases. So, and then we have additional considerations, and some of this, is timing that we're looking at. In terms of, we're looking at the contract and the stipended positions. And I'll let Jim talk about it because we have some other positions we want to add, but we'll get a better understanding. I'll let Jim explain.
Right, this is where we were talking about the $200,000, and we have some irons in the fire, so to speak. As I said earlier, with regards to extracurricular review and especially around fine arts, making some recommendations of how we can better support them. Nursing, Cheryl does an unbelievable job of utilizing grants, and we'll continue to look at opportunities there. We anticipate one of the applications for ARPA being something associated with a partnership with the town for some nursing, maybe assessment or support that can be provided. And then obviously some recommendations we anticipate coming from the special education review and the equity audit that'll be coming up.
And as you know, that was the equity audit. Equity review is one of our goals this year to explore a partner and with the goal of getting them on board to do it next year. That's comprehensive, and it will be probably a 3 to 5 year plan coming out of that.
And I was remiss that is also another one we'll be applying in partnership with the town for ARPA funding.
Yeah, that's the thing about North Andover, I think, that's special. You really don't, people try to do this, but I think in terms of like the relationship with the youth center and the partnership with them, I mean, to have the ability to have such a diverse set of kids and students of ours go there, but also to have our staff working with Rick Gorman's staff and that integration, it has to be one of the most successful and popular programs in the summer. I'm not sure of the number, but it continues to grow every year.
It sells out very fast.
Yeah.
It's like
Never been able to
concert
get in.
tickets.
4 minutes last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So those are those proposed items. So what I think this budget does, and it's been really nice, is the ability to balance our needs immediate and provide the positions that are part of the long-term plan, but also thinking ahead to the future with our projects. And so overall, our FY23 budget was $57,217,200. Level services budget, bringing this in, is $2,106,946. The recovery service positions, and this is really the critical component of this, what we're able to do here, is to bring into the operating budget the $1,040,000 that we covered, the positions that we talked about tonight from last year in combination with the operating. And that brings in 50% were operating last year, 50% were the recovery. Most of them overlap on our long-term plan, and the ability to bring them all together, that would have a total increase of 5.5%. That's in line with the talks and the work we've done with the town manager, and for a total increase of $3,146,946, with an overall FY21 budget of $364,146. I might need the math interventionist, a little tongue-tied. And that support, but that is the overview. And then the next steps. So really the most immediate next steps coming up for the committee anyway. In linked to the agenda tonight, you will see we have an executive summary. We have tabs to click on the budget calendar. It's a totality. We anticipate thoughtful conversations moving forward as this goes to the select board, finance committee, working with the town manager. But coming up, so tonight's the recommended budget. We'll have a public hearing next Thursday, January 19th. The school committee vote will follow on February 2nd. And after it winds its way through the process that we do every year, we'll end up at town meeting. And that we'll take a vote. And this is, it's exciting. It's exciting to have these capital projects and this operating budget to support what our kids need and deserve. So thank you. And we'll take any questions.
Ms. Picard, do you have questions?
My only question is, just to remind me, after we vote to approve the budget, we send it to the select board and the finance committee?
Yes.
That's all, thank you.
Ms. Vitsky?
Yep, I have a question. So given that we've talked about the increased needs and the number of students receiving services, is there any way we can possibly move up that assistant director position to this budget?
So I think it's one of those things. I think one is we'll have, it has something that we've planned a long time. And so, we'll always look for opportunities to do things, For example, we've had a out-of-district coordinator that was 0.6. And so as that person will retire, we'll look at different ways to be creative, if that's possible. But right now, we have it in the following budget. So we'll explore those
I'd like
options.
to see it in this budget, that's my only,
Duly noted for the record.
my only comment.
I would support that.
I would support that too, Ms.
Mr. Hicks, questions?
Just so those watching at home have an understanding, when we talk about level services, if we were to do things exactly the same next year as we did this year, it's still going to cost us an extra $2.1 million. That's what level services mean, right? We're keeping
That's
it.
right, bringing forward everything that we currently have.
Got it. Just
That's the
so-
additional cost, correct.
Running schools costs more money every year, no matter what.
Salaries go up, inflate, all of those
Potentially.
reasons we talked about, yeah.
But really, if we only got that, we'd be losing positions
Yep.
because all those recovery services positions would not be included.
Right.
So it wouldn't look like this year, it would look like
A
pre-pandemic.
couple years ago.
So with the positions that we have talked about coming into the operating budget, is a true level services budget. We're moving forward with everything we have.
So
5.5.
if we
Correct.
want to keep everything the way it is right now, we'd have to go with the 5.5%
Correct.
increase. Thank you.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. McDevitt?
Yep, just a couple of quick things. One, just really to remind people, public hearing next week. I think it's the 19th, if my date's right. That is really the opportunity for members of the community to come forward and speak and make suggestions and, recommendations and really start to have some conversation about what they're hearing and what they're feeling. So if there's something that Dr. Gilligan presented in this that you kind of say, that just doesn't seem right with me, and maybe I agree with Ms. Vitsky, in terms of moving that up. I'd like to see that moved up. That's where we kind of get our feedback publicly to then kind of work with Dr. Gilligan and his team in order to do that. So again, just a reminder on that. I'm going to go back in time because I can, and I think Dr. Maley was here then, but we used to do these budgets, if you remember, with above the line and below the line, and it was a true financial based budget, right? And so you would literally look at that line and you'd go, wow, so like if we had an extra $60,000, we could have a media specialist or something like that. But, you got to keep to the budget line, right? So we don't get that, right? And that was very hurtful to people in the community because they looked at something as being prioritized over something else, right? And that, might have impacted their kids or their school or something like that. I look at this as very educationally focused. I think I've said this for the past couple of years. This is very driven by our strategic plan. I like the fact that, we're looking at, and I know that there's more detail behind it, but, what those anticipated costs are when Kittredge opens, or reopens, I should say. I don't know, expands. The middle school expands, all of those type of things, those things are planned. They're in the budget. We're working with town manager in order to get all of those in. So again, I just, want to say thank you for kind of continuing to keep us moving to educationally based, planning based, and not like a whim of kind of what's going on and what's happening. I'm really encouraged to hear Ms. Marks, talk about the grants that kind of come in. I remember a number of years ago, we had somebody who, I think part-time kind of, tried to help write some of those grants. I don't know what may or may not be available, but, maybe there's a partnership with somebody at UMass Lowell in their education department, Merrimack, where we can continue to kind of explore some of those opportunities to help with grant writing. I know if you've got a tote bag of grants, and I have the visual of a teacher in my head, and that tote bag is probably pretty massive and kind of weighing you down. So all of that is really kind of great. I think the one thing that I think about is this is level services kind of all across the board, and 5.5 is great, and this is fantastic. But we're kind of doing a lot of what we're doing this year, next year, right? And yes, we've got those programs that are in the budget. They're kind of going to be built upon. But I would just kind of make sure we're not missing anything. We're not missing a program to help our students, whether it's a part-time teacher or, some form of program that we need to add in that maybe is, 5.6 or, I don't know exactly what that is, but there's nothing that's like new kind of coming in. This is next year is this year from a budget perspective, and I'm appreciative of 5.5. The town manager, the select board, FinCom, all great and fantastic. But I want to really be sure that this serves the needs of the community. So, yeah.
A couple of things. The first thing you said and the last thing you said.
Okay.
The first thing, I just want to piggyback on that one in request that if people are planning on asking questions at the public hearing, it really helps if you send it to us in advance, especially if it's something that we might have to research, so we can have the answer that night instead of saying, oh, we'll have to get back to you on that one. And then the last comment, remind me what it was.
Just about, I hate to say we're only doing
Okay.
level services, but,
Yep.
are we serving everyone?
So just to alleviate some concern there, what you saw tonight was a direct result of meeting with the principals and, whatever, and them meeting with their staff, but it was them that said, what we really want to do is continue. We think this is working and helping us through recovery services. And we did ask, is there anything else you can think of at this moment, now that could change, that you think could also help? And what you see is what we got from them. So at this moment, they don't have those identified needs, but those certainly could come up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's
Dr.
it.
Mealy, where you're saying that it would be helpful to have those questions in advance, would it be helpful for us to have like a button on the website that says questions about the budget, enter here?
We will put one there, yes.
You rock.
I was going to say, Dr. Mealy, every year, Dr. Mealy has the same request. Send them the questions, and we usually come, and then we post them as we answer them out, and we put them on the website. So you can send them to Dr. Mealy, send them to Michelle McHugh, send them to me, and we'll have that for next time.
Thank you for that clarification and for all of this work. There are a lot of moving parts, and you guys are like a well-oiled machine with all the information that needs to be put together. And I know that there's a lot of time that went into this, and it was a busy week, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, where are we? B. We are on B. Okay. We are, item B under new business is transportation invitation for bids. Request to solicit bids for a 5-year term. Mr. Mealy, Dr. Mealy, that's you.
Yes, so what we'll be asking at the next meeting will be for approval from the school committee to allow us to actually solicit bids. There's an invitation for bids, IFB, that we are putting together for transportation. It's a 3-year contract, and just as we are just finishing, it would have 2 one-year options at our discretion. It has benefited us in the past because it's much more, it kind of mitigates inflation, having those years bid initially and what the percentage increases are going to be. So it certainly benefits us, and it's at our discretion to take up the option or not. So we have attached that bid. I will say that the back end of that, the contract that they will sign is being revised. Christine is working on a new contract for all vendors in the town and school department. So we'll have that attached. It won't change substantially from what you're seeing, but mainly we need the school committee approval to solicit for a 5-year contract rather than a 3.
And that's not in our packet, right? The bid's not in our packet now.
No, I thought it might be attached, but we have it and can give it to you guys. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We, clarifying question, we're currently like in the year 5.
We're in year 5, exactly.
Because we've done this before.
So this is it. Yep.
And then I was reading through the transportation bid that's attached. We provide transportation for St. Michael's School.
Correct.
Can you just explain why? I think I know the answer, but I think when people read through it, that might be like, we do that? What's the reason
They're
for
North
it?
Andover residents. We're obligated to transport them as well.
Yep, part of state law, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Yes.
Other questions? There's no action needed tonight. on
Not
this.
tonight.
Okay,
Nope.
great. Okay.
Couldn't remember exactly.
Is there public comment as we draw to item 9 on the agenda?
Good evening. My name is Sasha Weinrich. I live at 21 Sawyer Road. I'd firstly like to thank the school administration and the school committee for submitting a request for ARPA funds to be used for special education review. I know that was approved, and thank you very much. I think that's a great benefit to our community. I had a few questions. I know this is public comment, not questions, but because there is a hearing and because we're working through the FY24 budget, I thought it may be prudent to just ask them now. So my first question was actually about the assistant special education director and why it was planned in future years, not this year or for FY24. So thank you to the school committee members for bringing that up. As a private citizen, I absolutely would also be in favor of that initiative being in the FY24 budget. The second question I have, or just comment, is really clarity on the equity audit. When is the equity audit planned generally? And what is generally the desired scope of the equity audit? I know it was talked about as part of the goals and kind of, between school committee members at meetings, but I wasn't sure of, what exactly was the desired scope. Is that an equity audit that includes just a review of diversity among staff members? Does that include an equity audit among students of the district? And it'd be helpful to have some clarity around that. Again, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey there, Michael Liss, 30 Leanne Drive. So I have a couple things. So first of all, I want to thank Ms. Petrowski for your comments in regards to the open meeting discussion. It takes a lot of courage, in my opinion, to look at your own actions and reflect on them in that way. And so I really applaud it. Thank you very much. And so as someone who is a member of a much less prominent board in town, I have learned a lot from watching it about the way that I need to accord myself as well. And so I just want you to know that that has been useful to me as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then as a second bit, I would like to thank Dr. Gilligan and Dr. Mealy for their tremendous effort in putting together a budget. I know it's a Herculean effort every year. You guys do a tremendous amount with the resources that you have in this town. But I want to stress that we do not give you enough resources. And that goes into both operating and capital. On the operating side, despite increases in the last few years, we remain in the bottom 15% on per pupil school spending across the state. Now that is an improvement. A few years ago, we were in the bottom 20 out of about 340 school districts. When I tell people that, they're usually pretty horrified to find that out. And so, you know, we are, everything that we have had in the last few years has been progress, but we have a very, very long way to go, and that presents itself in a lot of ways. So one of them was the one that was discussed earlier, with the fact that we have 2 half-time assistant principals spread out across our elementary schools. We should have 5 full-time. It will be great to have 5 half-time in a few years. You know, one minor in terms of the overall cost, but it's indicative of the way it represents across a lot of things. I was told recently that we do not have a book purchasing budget in our elementary school libraries, that all book purchases come out of parent donations. And, you know, PTOs and parent donations have done an enormous job of trying to fill in a lot of those gaps, but one of the results of that is that because of the uneven economic distribution in our town, those funds are distributed unevenly to our schools. So, you know, I don't think it would be any surprise for people to hear that Franklin's and Sargent's PTOs generate a lot more funds for their school than Atkinson's and Thompson's, and that means that some schools get more resources than others. And, you know, that is not a great system for us to be living in as a town or as a larger community. And then on the capital side, obviously capital budgets are different than operating budgets. And it is great that we are building a new Kittredge, that we are expanding the middle school. Those are desperately needed things. Those are the 2 most needed things. But Atkinson is in really rough repair shape. Those gleaming floors in Franklin School were rated fair to poor by a recent assessment. The buildings need a lot of work. Neither of those buildings have sprinkler systems. So, you know, if there's my kids in Franklin, if there's a fire in that school, there will be no sprinkler system to put out that fire. We are using portable classrooms that were meant to last a decade. They are now, I believe, heading on 40, 50 years old. There is a lot of maintenance debt. And unfortunately, under the current plan, while the middle school and Kittredge will happen under the levy, Atkinson will not. And Franklin, if it happens, is currently scheduled for 2033. It's over a decade from now, which to me is sort of into the never happening range. And so this is, again, not meant to be any criticism of the administration. They are doing what they can with the resources we give them. But I think that we need to bang the drum a little bit harder to get them more resources. And, you know, we have in recent years turned down a lot of opportunities for more resources as a town. And when I talk with folks in town about trying to move them towards accepting those resources, what I hear back from them is, oh, well, when I listen to town meeting, when I go to school committee meetings and select board meetings, everyone seems to feel that the budget is in great shape. Everyone seems to be happy and comfortable and feel like we're making progress. And so why would we need more money? We don't need more money. I would rather the town not change rather than accept this money. And so I think we need to be a little bit more frank with the public about where we are financially, about where we are relative to other towns in our neighboring communities, and push a little bit harder. And it's going to be a multi-year, long-term effort to change those finances, right? I'm not expecting us to change it tomorrow. And those things that I cited, you know, if we were to try to implement them tomorrow, as Mr. McDevitt mentioned, we would have to take from something else, right? And so I'm not saying that we can magically fill all of these gaps just by snapping our fingers, but we do need a long-term, hard conversation as a community about what we're willing to invest in our schools, because I don't think it's enough right now. So anyways, this was a long rant. Thank you very much for listening to it. And thank you all very much for your hard work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And are we ready to vote? Okay. Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Beatsky?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. We are adjourned at 8:55.